part of We the People, celebrating 250 years. Here's This Day in History.
Well, as we continue to celebrate America's 250th birthday this summer, we're sharing our We the People series.
Yeah, it's about the people, places, and things that have shaped our country into what it is today. Here's Charlie Shortino with This Day in History.
Hello again. On this day, August 9th, back in 1974, Gerald Ford became president after Richard Nixon resigned. Ford was sworn as the 38th president of the United States in the East Room of the White House. He is the first president to be sworn in as a president through appointment rather than election, meaning he was not elected as president. He wasn't elected as vice president either. After taking the oath of office, President Ford spoke to the nation in a television address declaring, "My fellow Americans, our long national nightmare is over." Oddly enough, Ford had replaced Spiro Agnew as the vice president only 8 months before that. Agnew had to resign in disgrace after he was charged with income tax evasion and political corruption. In September of 1974, Ford pardoned Nixon for any crimes he may have committed while in office, explaining that he wanted to end the national divisions created by the Watergate scandal. That's This Day in History for August 9th. For We the People, I'm Charlie Shortino.